To another episode of Sit and See. I'm Dr. Jared Jones. My research area was ancient systems of meditation, mostly Indo Tibetan systems of meditation. I also did research into the cognitive science of meditation, starting from about 1950, going up to about 2020. But I'm a philosopher, not a cognitive scientist, to be clear. And I also did research into the philosophy of science. This stream is aimed at people who are interested in doing some meditation practice, but also having their questions about meditation answered from someone who's been meditating for about 20 years and has trained to some real depth in both Buddhism and Taoism, in addition to doing all the academic stuff. So hopefully I can provide you with something that's worth audio is faint. Okay. Let me try sliding the mic up. Hello, Cleric. Welcome. Sam, welcome back. Let me just see how this is sounding on my side. Hold on. Okay, sorry about the delay. Hopefully that will fix the faint audio without maxing out your speakers. Time will tell. Okay, so we have Sam, who's one of the regulars. We have Cleric, who's one of the regulars, also a member of the course. I will remind you at this time, as I am wont to do, that I'm trying to begin doing this full time. I'm going to be producing a huge amount of educational material for meditation. I'm also going to be producing response videos. So anybody that sends in a question on one of the videos, including this stream, I'm going to try to produce, not in the chat obviously, but in the comments. I'm going to be producing response videos, so that'll be an ongoing thing I'm producing. If you join the course down below, it's $29. It's the cost of basically one meal to have a much more personal relationship and train a bit more hardcore in meditation if you'd like. So please do, if you haven't signed up, sign up to my school down below. Okay, now that that has been said, let's jump into any questions we might have. Sam, do you have any questions from the past week or so of practice? And Cleric, I know that you have gone through most of the course material on the page. If you have some questions about any of the techniques we're doing, please pop them into the chat. Since I was making a video on this today, I'll give you a little rundown on this subject. This is not an actual meditation technique, but it is quite interesting to do. It gives you some insight into what your mind is like and how your mind creates things, and it's not that hard to do. So if everybody could find a spot to look where maybe your carpet, or I'll come back to that, Cleric. So just for this little micro exercise to show you how your mind is really busy creating reality, take a look at your carpet or something that has a pattern on it that's kind of complex, and it should be something kind of intricate. Or if you have something natural nearby, like a pile of leaves or some grass, something like this, the thing to do would be just select something that's kind of in the middle of that in your visual field. Okay, so for this micro exercise to show you how your consciousness is creating experience, I just want you to find something on your floor, like my carpet's right here in front of me, and find something that's kind of in the middle of that pattern or relatively towards the middle. a patch of grass would work just fine, or anything with a complex pattern. Place your eyes there and look very intensely at one point in that pattern. And don't move your eyes until I tell you. I'm just going to keep talking to you so that you're not bored. So as you continue to look at this one little area, you can blink, but don't move your eyes, or the effect won't happen. After about 10 or 15 seconds, most of you will notice that the visual field starts to get a little weird around the edges, and you probably start losing some detail in the overall visual field. This is normal, don't worry. Keep focusing in the middle of that patch of pattern. And as you focus there, I don't want to give you too many psychological suggestions, or you'll think that I'm doing it through hypnosis or something, but just start to notice what's happening in your visual field without looking around. Keep looking at that one point. Keep your eyes on that point. Now, since about 45 seconds or 60 seconds have passed now, you might be starting to notice that the pattern that you thought was quite distinct all around this point that you've selected with your vision is now starting to go away. And some of you may have noticed, depending on the type of pattern that you're looking at, that whatever you're looking at in the center of the visual field has started to multiply and fill up the rest of the visual field, like. And the reason for this, now very carefully, very slowly, just start to look to the right of that pattern or to the left, doesn't really matter, and you'll see that your mind just fills in now whatever's really there. And as you start to look around, you'll notice that what you were seeing only 10 seconds ago doesn't exist at all, which is really weird. All of this pattern that was all around the visual field that you thought was real stuff and the real pattern and real objects, none of it was there. So, how to say? Our mind is a reality generating machine, and it uses some information that comes in through our senses, and then it extrapolates that. It takes what it expects or thinks or has learned should be there, and then it redoubles that and redoubles that until you have sort of an amalgamation of some kind of stimulation you had of your senses and all sorts of information that you have in your mind. So this is one way to show you that what you're experiencing, even in the center of the visual field, yeah, it's like a hallucination. It's not a hallucination, but it's like a hallucination, like a small scale one. So even what's in the center of the visual field, according to cognitive scientists, isn't what's really there. And I'm not saying there are no physical objects. There are physical objects, but what we get to see of those objects is interpretation's not quite strong enough. It's what they call qualia in the philosophy of mind. We get to see an aspect of reality that is generated by our mind after our senses have been stimulated. And what we're seeing is not the physical thing. What we're seeing is what our mind has generated based upon our senses being stimulated in a certain way. So the room you're sitting in and the carpet you were just looking at, or whatever you were just looking at, is actually your mind, not the room. What you're looking at is your mind. And Maya, yeah. So not everything you see is an illusion. I mean, clearly, if I were to bang on this mic, you would hear it. If you knocked on the table, you would hear it. If somebody hit you in the head with a 2x4, it's going to hurt. Those aren't illusions. But the fact that you don't know that your mind is doing it and you're not aware that your mind is doing it means that you think it all comes from reality itself. Until probably 2 minutes ago, when you started looking around your room and realized that all these patterns and things you see are actually coming from your mind, like 94% of it is just stuff your mind is coming up with when you're not paying close attention to things. I mean, that should be like a radical change in the way that you think about the things that you're seeing. And the same is true of what you hear, what you smell, what you taste, your tactile sensations, even in your body. So this is called qualia, that your mind comes up with experiences rather than seeing the qualities of actual physical stuff. Qualia is the experience, we could say, the experience layer that your mind puts between the physical thing and your mind. So here's your mind over here, and the physical thing has stimulated the senses in some way, and the mind generates some kind of picture, and this is what you're seeing, not the actual physical object. So this is a qualia. The physical object has qualities like mass and velocity and whatever. Qualia is just like your private world of experiences. And actually, they've done a bunch of tests on this. Nobody has exactly the same experiences as you do. We're all slightly different, which is pretty cool, actually. Okay, so what we're talking about is consciousness, and one way that you can start investigating whether consciousness is a physical thing or is more than something physical. And one of the videos I'm going to be putting up in the next day or so is looking at this issue of the so-called hard problem of consciousness. So the hard problem of consciousness is this idea that even though there's a bunch of particles, and those are real, right? And at least as real as things can be, that mind, when you look at it from a first person perspective and you analyze the stuff that it's doing, it becomes very difficult to say that mind is just the particles, because electrons, protons, and neutrons don't have a private world of internal experience where they generate qualia, right? I mean, what is the color red? What is that, and where is that exactly? Because the physical particles don't have that. The redness is something that occurs as a relationship between physical things stimulating an organ and your mind generating an image, and then more, in a sense, sort of like painting it red. So there's no red out there. There's no red out there. There's no square out there. There's no round square out there. Certainly. There's no red square out there. So what you're experiencing is showing you actually that mind is something more than simply particles. This is what people like David Chalmers have argued for a long time, and in the video that's coming up, I mentioned this in the Tukdam video for those who are interested. Okay, so rewinding a little bit, if you visualize an apple, this is an exercise I do with people a lot. Visualize an apple. Visualization meditations are not one of the techniques I teach for a number of reasons, but I do a fair amount of visualization practices. So visualize an apple in front of you about arm's distance at the level of sort of between your eyebrows, and visualize it about the size of a normal apple for you, red with a brown stem and one green leaf. Okay? So see this apple in front of you as best you can. So I'm looking at the apple now, and mentally, if you flick that apple, can you hear it? I'm doing it with my hand, obviously, but mentally, if you flick it as hard as you can, does it make a sound? And then if you really try to lean forward with your mind and smell it, does it have a smell? And then imagine that you took a bite out of it and you're crunching it and chewing it. Does it have a taste? So now say the word apple in your mind. This is an object. Well, actually, let me back up. Let me ask you this. With your eyeballs, there has to be light in the room for you to see something. Where is the light illuminating the apple that you're seeing in your mind? Your mind's finger hurts. Where is the light source illuminating this apple? And where is the eyeball absorbing the photons to see the color red exactly? Where is that happening? There's no light source that you're visualizing to hit protons over there, and there are no protons coming to enter your mind or to enter some eyeball in your mind to know the object. So the object is self-illuminating. I mean, this is really weird in terms of normal physics, isn't it? Let me ask you this. Before you said apple in your mind, what lungs did you breathe into? And when you heard it, what air was vibrating so that an eardrum could vibrate so that you could have a mental image of sound? Where was all that happening? And when you took a bite of it, what particles came off that object and came in contact with what taste buds so that you could taste it? When you smelled it, what particles floated off the object to a nose so that it could be smelled? None of these things happened, and yet you could smell it, taste it, hear it. You could touch it, you could flick it, and it was tactile. You flicked it and it made a sound. You can speak in your, like, this virtual space in your mind is really rich, fascinating, and totally defies the laws of physics as we understand them. And now you know this from personal experience in less than 5 minutes. Here's the other thing. Neither you nor me nor any scientist on the planet armed with any scientific instrument whatsoever can look at that apple. Your eyes can't see it. Your ears can't hear it. Your tongue can't taste it. Your nose can't smell it. Your ears can't hear it. There's no other being on the planet who can grab that apple and do anything with it whatsoever. There's no instrument that can be built or has been built that can detect that apple whatsoever. What it can detect is movement of stuff in your brain, the movement of chemicals, the excitation of electrons, whatever. The apple itself, which is very clearly existing in some form, it's not physical, but it's very clearly existing. You just did a whole bunch of stuff with it for like 4 minutes. That apple can't be detected by anything physical, can't be seen by anything physical, can't be measured by anything physical. Now, since even your own senses, external senses, which are designed by nature to observe the physical world, right? Your vision observes the physical world, your ears observe the physical world, your nose, your tongue, your tactile body all observe the physical world. All of the tools of science observe the physical world. All of these, not just for you and me, but for everyone on Earth, all of those fail to see this apple. What does that tell you about the apple? It's an object that defies all the laws of physics, can't be seen by any physical instrument or anything designed to see physical things whatsoever. And the only thing that can see it is consciousness. Consciousness. Let that sink in. Let that sink in, how fucking strange your consciousness is. Someone in the chat said it's a magical apple and that it's God, you know? Yeah, I'm being a little bit, sort of flippant, but it is like magic. It's like it just pops into existence because you decided for it to exist, and it has these properties that defy physics. And this is why the consciousness is considered to be a deity in a lot of Asian religious traditions. This is why. Okay. So here's the point: consciousness is an instrument that that can detect things that aren't physical. Think about this for a second. You have an instrument inside your being that is the only instrument on the planet that can detect a non-physical object. How much stranger than your five external senses must consciousness be if it can generate things that defy the laws of physics and it can know something that is completely undetectable by any physical means? This is why consciousness is considered to be a non-physical thing in Buddhism. It's not because the Buddha said so. It's not because Shiva said so. It's not because Jesus said so. It's not because the great Goomba in this, the spaghetti monster said so. When you look inside, that's how it actually is. That's what your consciousness is like. And you just proved it to yourself in less than 5 minutes. You don't need me to tell you. You just did the work and you saw it. So there was a neuroscientist, I'm forgetting his first name. Koch is his last name, I believe. But he made a bet with David Chalmers about 25 years ago, I think 28 years ago now. And he said that we will have solved this problem and figured out how the brain generates consciousness within 25 years. So this was, I think, 1997 or something. And 25 years later, they were at a conference together, and he had to admit, and he admitted in public, that they still haven't figured it out. And I think it's because the brain does not generate consciousness. And this is part of the argument for example, this is the classical argument from Buddhism. Once you have this insight that your mind is not a physical thing, then the question becomes, where did and that physical things don't produce consciousness, the fundamental kind of consciousness, okay? Then the question becomes, during your first moment in the womb, where did that consciousness come from? Because it didn't come from the coming together of your mother and father's genetic material and forming the body, because the body isn't something that's weird like the apple and consciousness, right? It's not, it doesn't have these weird non-physical properties. It's entirely physical. So where did that first moment of consciousness in the womb come from? Where does the current moment of consciousness come from? It comes from the immediately previous moment of consciousness. So likewise, therefore, the first moment of consciousness in the womb came from a previous moment of consciousness before it was in the womb. The question of how they interact, the mind-body problem, is a different problem. It's a different problem. Important, but different. Since it came from somewhere else besides the womb, we have now effectively proved rebirth, or at least life before life. In the same way, when the body dies, since consciousness isn't something that's physical and is not ultimately dependent upon the physical, at the last moment of death, the mind is going to go somewhere else. So now we've proved, at least in some sense, not proved, but supported greatly the idea of rebirth. So we can get life before life and life after death just in like a 5-minute exercise. We can get pretty good personal, like direct personal evidence for this. Okay, the chat has been going nuts, so let me answer some questions and then we'll do some practice. For intensive breath, I end up breathing a lot faster. Should I try to breathe naturally? So yes, you will find that quite often when you're doing any kind of breath practice, it's very hard to just let your breath do what it's doing. And a part of your mind wants to control the breath. And especially if you want to get done with the session because it's hard or you just don't want to be doing it or whatever, you'll count faster and you'll breathe faster. So that's quite normal. If anything, let's say it one more time, if you do anything and you don't need to do anything, the thing to do would be breathe slower. There's a natural connection psychologically. I can't remember the name of I think it's the parasympathetic nervous system. There's I think a parasympathetic response between breathing rate and the calmness of your mind. So if you slow down the breathing even artificially, your mind becomes more calm. And this fact is used by a lot of meditative traditions, yogi traditions, to help meditators achieve a greater state of meditative concentration more quickly. So this is a very common technique in the Taoist tradition, for example, and it has correlates also in the Tibetan tantras. There are techniques that use that approach. So if anything, you slow down your breathing a bit, but the general advice for beginners is less is more. Just focus your mind on what's actually going on, i.e., focus your mind on the tactile sensations of breathing and counting that. Okay. Okay. So how do the two substances interact? How do mind and body interact if they're two different substances? So Buddhism is not actually a substance dualism like not Kant, Descartes, right? It's this is a bit nerdy, so stay with me. This Buddhism is a neutral monism. So at the level that we're operating in now, in terms of everyday conventional experience, for all intents and purposes, you can consider mind and matter to be two different substances. For all practical purposes, you can consider them to be two different substances. As soon as you start diving into the sort of subtle aspects of consciousness, then that begins to change. So from a Buddhist point of view, basically the bridge between the physical and the mental is not something that's coming from the side of the physical. And this is a solution actually that's been proposed both this is a solution that's been proposed in Western philosophy as well. For example, the main critique of substance dualism, where you have two different substances, non-physical mind and physical body, is that you can, because there's nothing to bridge the two, they can't interact philosophically, right? They can't interact. They're completely different. However, it has been said before, both in Western philosophy and in Buddhist philosophy, the bridge actually comes from the consciousness side. So there is a sub-physical substance, I like to say. You can call it chi, you can call it prana, you can call it kundalini in some cases. The Tibetans call it wind or lung. So lung, wind, is the bridging substance that bridges between the body and the mind. And as a matter of fact, I've talked about this before, it's not actually necessary for you to accept, as a practitioner even, that those things exist as they are described in the texts. What ends up happening, and someone here actually has had this happen in the week that I've been going live, if you just do body scanning meditation, for example, and you stop for a little while on the areas where they say there are chakras and so forth, you'll feel very intense bodily sensations in those areas. And so whether or not you believe that there are chakras, if you put your mind in certain areas, you feel way more tactile sensation in those areas that's just sort of going on there all the time. Yeah? So it's not actually a model of reality that you need to believe in, that there's this third substance between mind and the physical. But in terms of later forms of practice, more advanced forms of practice that utilize this fact, there are these tactile or somatic elements of your being that you can grab onto. And once you have the ability to grab onto them, they really do seem to move through the body in various channels that are very much like what's described in the Tibetan and Chinese medical systems. And when you manipulate those, they create various kinds of psychological effects and perceptual effects. And again, that you don't even really need to believe that those substances exist. You can just do the stuff and you feel things happening, and it is as it is described in the text. That's really all there is to it. And the people that I know that are really, really good at doing those sorts of things have also showed me other things that seem to defy the laws of physics. I'm the nerdy PhD guy who's also, split my time between hanging out with academics who don't believe any of this and hanging out with yogis that can actually do all this stuff for real. I'm kind of a weird animal. Okay. I think we have covered the questions in the chat. If there are no further questions, we'll dive into meditation. Since it's a Sunday, I figured we will go a little bit more hardcore. We've got a few new people. It looks like we've got 6 or 7 people. If you're new, don't be intimidated. If you have comments, questions, concerns, drop them into the chat. I'm happy to answer questions, whether you're part of my tradition or not. I teach a pretty universalist approach in these streams. So the practice we're going to do today is Foundation 4. We're going to jump not straight into it, but we're going to go at it pretty quickly and pretty hard. And I'm going to try to get everyone to be able to open at least 2, if not 3, of the external sensory gates. Okay? It's exciting. Okay, so let's dive in. I'm just going to talk you through it as we go. So let's begin with intensive breath practice. Just place your mind on the breath with as much force, as much intensity as you can. And then we're going to go into body scanning to really calm the mind down. Then we're going to go into opening the tactile gate, opening the visual gate, and opening the auditory gate. So here we go. Begin with the breath. Bring your mind to breathing in. Find the most intense point of sensation in one of the nostrils. For me, it's over here today. Place your mind there. Don't analyze. Don't think. Don't try to figure it out. Don't visualize anything. Just feel what's actually there on the nostril. Bring all the bandwidth of your mind into that tiny patch of skin until all of you has been put into this one little piece. And keep it there as if your life depended upon it. Ready? Begin. We're going to begin a body scan now. Bring your mind to the right foot, right ankle, right calf, into the knee joint, right lower thigh, upper thigh, and into the hip joint on the right side. Bring the mind into the left foot, left ankle, left calf, left knee, left lower thigh, upper thigh, into the left hip joint. Bring your mind to the front of the pelvis, back of the pelvis, including the buttocks, find the sacrum, which is between your two hip bones. Slide down to the tailbone and try to bring all your awareness into the tailbone. Slide forward to the anus, perineum, and scan the sexual organ at your own pace. Now come to the lower abdomen, the waist in the front. Slide around to do the waist in the back. Bring your attention now to the upper abdomen. And slide around to the back. Now to the upper chest. And slide around to the back. Top of the left shoulder. Front. Side. Back, including the scapula. Armpit. And the whole bicep area. Into the elbow. Forearm. Wrist. Palm and back of hand. Thumb. Pointer. Index. Middle, ring, and pinky. Go to the top of the right shoulder, front, side, back, including the scapula, armpit, bicep area, elbow, into the forearm, wrist, palm and back of hand, thumb, pointer, middle, ring, pinky. Come to the lower third of the neck. So everything from above the scapula and above the collarbones, that whole big triangle of the lower neck. The middle third of the neck, the upper third of the neck, and into the joint between the neck and the skull. Back of the scalp, right side of the scalp, left side of the scalp, left ear, right ear, nose, eyebrow on the left side, eyebrow on the right side, and the forehead. Bring your awareness now to the tactile sensations of the left eye, the right eye, left cheek, right cheek, the upper lip, the lower lip, the chin, bring your awareness to the skin inside the mouth, and briefly scan your teeth. The roof of the mouth, underneath the tongue, into the tongue, follow the tongue to the throat. Slide up from the throat to the top of the head, just the scalp now on the top of the head. Find the most sensitive point on the top of the head. Stretch your awareness down now. From that point, keeping that point in mind, stretch your awareness down to include your left fingertips and nail beds. Without losing those 2 points, stretch your awareness down from the crown of the head again to include your right fingertips and nail beds. Without losing those 3 points, stretch your awareness down to include the left heel, toes, toe tips, nail beds. Without losing those 4 points, stretch your awareness down again to include the right heel, toes, toe tips, nail beds. Hold the 5 points. Now relax the mind from the 5 points. Just let this awareness spread out and become aware in particular of everything facing to the front and everything facing behind in terms of tactile sensation. So front and back. Let that go. Everything facing right and left. Let that go. Everything facing up and down. Let that go. Now we're going to combine the 6 points. If you can't do all 6 points, then just do the first 4. Front and back. Keep those 2 and add on left and right. Keep those 4, add on up and down. Refresh the 6 points, front, back, left, right, up, down. Hold. Refresh again, front, back, left, right, up, down. Hold. Now gently gently release the 6 points and just let your awareness spread out in the body and rest in the nature of tactile awareness. Don't do anything, don't modify anything, don't adjust anything. Just let your mind be like a mirror, fully absorbed on and reflecting all tactile sensations. Okay, take a very short break. Move slowly. Don't turn off your concentration. Turn the volume down from a 9 or a 10 down to a 5 or a 6. Move slowly and deliberately. Just maintain a 5 or a 6, about half your awareness on the tactile field. If you need to ask questions at this point, please do. Okay, we're going to move on to opening the next sense gate. I often find this sense gate for a lot of people, even though tactile is more important for gaining concentration, I find the visual one to be more significant spiritually because we identify so strongly with vision. And when you open that gate and you realize there's no you involved really, and that the thing generating the experience of vision and the thing experiencing the vision are actually one entity. When you directly experience that, it's very profound for a lot of people. So let's just give it a go without getting too weird about it. So maintaining some of the concentration, calmness that you've already built up with the tactile body, now move your awareness away from the tactile body into your vision. Bring your vision straight out ahead of you. Don't look at anything in particular, just gaze. So just have a relaxed gaze pointing in front of you. The first thing to do is to become aware without moving your eyes, keeping your eyes in the same place. In this exercise, our awareness is going to be swimming inside the visual field as if the entire visual field were like a computer screen or a television screen. Our awareness is going to move around on the screen, but the screen itself should not move. So keep your eyes fixed and don't look at what you're looking at. Simply gaze in that direction. First, let your awareness swim forward in the visual field so that you're seeing within that visual field the things that are the furthest away. So everything to the front, let's call that. Now let your awareness swim to everything that is close to you. We'll call that everything to the back. So this will be maybe your eye sockets, your eyebrows, your nose, maybe your eyelashes, if you have floaters in your eye. Everything that's close to the point at which vision is originating in terms of your visual field. Okay, let that go. Let your awareness swim to the left and look at the furthest to the left things you can see without moving your gaze. Okay, let that go. Let your awareness now swim to the right as far as it can without moving your gaze. Okay, let that go. I'll just say this before we go further. As you continue to gaze in this direction, you will notice that the details of your visual field become less clear. That's okay. You may also see white light or golden light. That's totally normal. There's a lot of strange visual effects that happen if you keep your vision in one place, but don't be distracted by it. Again, we're just looking at the computer screen here, the computer screen of our visual field, so to speak. So it doesn't matter what appears there, just continue to see whatever is there. Now let your awareness swim upward as far as you can and look at the things that are the highest above you without looking up. Let your awareness now swim down, see everything that is below you as far as you can. Okay, let that go. Now we're going to try to combine two at a time. So let the awareness become strong in a forward and a backward direction. So everything close, everything far away, front and back. Okay, let that go. Everything left and right. Okay, let that go. Everything up and down. Okay, let that go. Now we're going to combine fields, front and back. Hold the 2 points, left and right. Hold the 4 points, up and down. Hold all 6 points. If you can't hold all 6, then just hold up, down, left, right. Refresh, front, back, left, right, up, down. Refresh, front, back, left, right, up, down. Now gently pull back the intensity of the 6 points and let them go. Keep the vision fully wide open and just behold the entire movie screen or laptop screen of your visual field. Take in the entire field and just exist in the fundamental nature of that field. Okay, and take a short break. As we take a short break, just keep your awareness, again, 50%, 60% in a state of concentration. Don't fully come out. But pull back the effort to it to about 50%. If you need to ask questions or make comments at this time, go ahead, but do so with the same degree of deliberateness, awareness, openness, stillness of mind that you've brought to the last two exercises. So maintaining that 50 or 60% concentration, just listen to me as I describe something a bit technical for opening the auditory field. Okay? So first I'd like you to just close your eyes. Since we just opened the visual field, I'd like you to become aware of the fact that if you let your awareness swim upwards in the darkness of having your eyes closed, you can still see the darkness. Now that your awareness swim down, you can see the bottom of the darkness, in a sense. So it's possible, even when there's no content in the visual field, to open the visual field. What you're seeing is the absence of light. So you can open the visual field whether or not there's an object appearing there or not. Likewise, keeping the eyes closed, you can open the auditory field even if there's nothing to hear in a particular direction. Let me give you an example. Occasionally, when you think you've heard something outside your house, for example, whether or not you really heard something, you think you've heard something outside your house, you can turn your auditory awareness towards the direction you thought the sound was coming from. And you get the sense that your ears have sort of perked up in the direction that you're aiming your auditory awareness or aiming your auditory energy. So, what happens in that case is that quite often you open your ears, so to speak, in that direction and you don't hear anything. Nonetheless, just like opening the visual field when the eyes are closed, you opened the auditory field in the direction where there was no sound, even though there was nothing to hear there. And this is very important because most of the directions we're going to be opening the auditory sense gate in won't have any sounds. So you can open the auditory sense gate even when there's no sound in all 6 directions. Even if it's completely silent, you can still do it. That's very important, and it's very important you know that you already have experience in doing that. So this is actually not unusual. What's unusual is you've probably never opened the entire auditory sense gate all at once. So keeping the ears open now, drawing your awareness to hearing. I want you to perk up or listen to the front. Now listen to the back. Try to hear everything you can, pointing your auditory faculties to the left. Open your auditory faculties now to the right. Let that go. Everything above. And let that go. Everything below. And release that. Now combining directions. Everything to the front and everything behind. Let that go. Everything to the left, everything to the right. Let that go. Everything above, everything below. And let that go. Now combining directions. everything to the front and the back. Holding those two in place, everything to the left and the right. Holding those 4 points. If it's already too much, just hold it there. If not, add on above and below. Refresh, front, back, left, right, up, down. Refresh again, front, back, left, right, up, down. And refresh one more time. Front, back, left, right, up, down. Now slowly pull back your awareness of the 6 points. Just let the auditory field open up completely in every direction. Don't allow your mind to be pulled. Don't allow your mind to pool on what you're hearing. Keep the auditory awareness open in every direction. Okay. Slowly, slowly open the eyes, not too quickly. Add on the visual consciousness. Front, back, left, right, up, down. Fully open the vision and the hearing. Add on the tactile consciousness. Front, back, left, right, up, down. Release the points and just hold open as best you can. Vision, hearing, tactile. Okay. Just bring the awareness back in now. If you're already completely at your limit, then take a little rest. Otherwise, if you'd like to capitalize on the calmness you've created in the mind, since the biggest three senses we have are already fairly non-reactive because of the practice we just did, bring your awareness into the mind now. You can close your eyes if you'd like. So become aware of whatever it is your mind is doing, thoughts, intentions, motivations, emotions, not what the tactile body is doing, not what vision is doing, not what hearing is doing, not what smell or taste are doing, just what consciousness is doing. And become aware of the flow or the passing of every new thought, motivation, intention, the desire to do something, the desire to not do something, the desire to move some part of your body or not move some part of your body, etc. Just don't place the mind anywhere, but open the consciousness gate in the same way you open the body gate, which is to say, don't allow the mind to rest or pool on any particular aspect of its own activities. Simply become aware of whatever appears before the mirror of consciousness and rest in intentionless, choiceless, mirror-like awareness. Okay. Try not to come out too quickly. If stuff is sore or you want to wiggle it around, do some Confucian circles. All right. That was a lot of new stuff. Questions about opening the tactile gate, visual gate, auditory gate, or observing consciousness? For those who weren't paying very close attention to time, this may be the first time you've ever sat for an hour of meditation. Mm. When you say your mind was dragging you around in the last bit, do you mean in the auditory field or the consciousness field? Just so you are all aware, there's a delay on my side. So I think it takes about 15 seconds for the audio to reach you guys. But your comments, I think, come through almost immediately, which is interesting. So as soon as you send the comment, I get it, but you don't hear what I've said for about 15 or 20 seconds. So from your perspective, maybe it looks like I just sit around silently for a while after you've sent a message. In any case, okay, so let's talk about that. That's a fairly important point. So the consciousness field is, as you noticed, very different. Very different. Trying to monitor it, I think, is much harder than trying to monitor any of the other senses. Because when you're monitoring the other senses, yes, if you can get them down to their basal level, let's say, it's visual consciousness is by nature a non-conceptual consciousness. So if you can tap into what vision is doing and pull back all the conceptual layers, it's already, how to say, in a sense, you can sort of use your mental consciousness to grab onto it, and then you're watching sort of the movie of visual consciousness. Or with auditory, I think auditory is even harder, right, than visual, because your mind just wants to go wherever the sound is and just immediately pool there and go, and then you have to reopen it back up to the places where there's no sound. It's very hard. The other thing about auditory is auditory spreads out literally for miles and miles and miles. The auditory field is huge. And so it gives you a much better sense doing the auditory field of what it's like to be aware of something that is beyond space, if that makes sense. Because it's formless, it's spread out over a huge area of space. Visual is a little bit more limited. Auditory is just massive. So then I think it's that auditory gives you a nice bridge to the consciousness, because consciousness has this subjective aspect of being like space. When you try to grab onto it and find it, it's sort of like the auditory field. It's just this giant wide open thing that seems to how to say, words are hard. The consciousness field, just to not use any analogies, is formless. It doesn't have a physical shape. It doesn't have a color. It doesn't have a smell. It doesn't have a taste. It doesn't have a tactile sensation. So the consciousness field is incredibly difficult to sort of subjectively land on, because there's nothing to grab onto. So when you're trying to first land on it, so to speak, all it will do is just grab onto whatever it can, because you're not used to sitting in a formless state. And therefore, the mind continues to try to grab onto something that has form, some thought or some physical sensation or some sound or some visual thing. It will run around, try to grab onto something to sort of, if you're successful in actually sort of entering a state of pure consciousness, we could say, to sort of pull you back out of that formless condition. But actually, consciousness is formless. And so it will, like a bull in a china shop, sort of run around and grab onto whatever it can. You know, a bull in a china shop's not the right thing. But the analogy of a they use this analogy of, at first, the mind is like a wild elephant. It's just this lumbering, terribly unwieldy thing that runs all over the place and can do a huge amount of damage. And then the mind is like an untamed monkey that's kind of mischievous and can still run around and get into things, and it's a big trouble. And then it's like an untrained bird. It's really sort of flighty, and all these little tiny movements are very, very, very difficult to observe and get under control. But eventually, there's this wonderful diagram. Let me see if I can find it and pull it up. 9 stages. But eventually, nice. Window. There it is. But eventually, you go from this condition of the wild elephant being led by an untamed monkey, and then slowly they're being purified by your activities, Oh yeah, they have the rabbit on there. That's right. Sorry, the rabbit. So then you have the rabbit, and slowly they're getting more and more tamed as you go, until eventually, oh, they don't have it there. Until eventually, let's see. There it is. Oh, it's not going to let me zoom in. Well, sorry, it's probably tiny on your screen, but eventually, then you can see you come up here and they're like floating off on a rainbow with all the other yogis. Up to, I think that's Manjushri over there, the Buddha of wisdom. Anyways, so the how to say consciousness is very, very, very difficult to fully absorb into. And now that I did all that, my bandwidth is terrible. Okay. Yeah, so consciousness is very, very difficult to absorb into. And this is why, for Foundation 4, opening the sense gates, we spend so much time making the 5 external senses less reactive. Because if you want to be able to rest on consciousness by itself, first, it's greatly to your advantage to be able to place your mind somewhere for a while, right? I mean, how many meditation things have you gone on the internet and seen? And it's like, just sit down, listen to this music, make yourself comfortable, just observe the flow of your thoughts. I mean, good luck with music playing and some ASMR voice guiding you through it, and freaking no experience placing your mind anywhere. Good luck just observing the flow of your thoughts. Good luck. I mean, we just sat for an hour. We spent about 50 minutes of that hour preparing the mind to observe the mind. And it was still really hard, right? Anyways, so yeah, that is admittedly an advanced practice. It's not an easy practice, and the reason that I have things laid out as they are to finally come back to it. When you place your attention on the breath, for example, when you place your attention on the breath, for example, you gain the ability to just grab on to one thing and observe it and make the mind a little quieter, right? And then you do body scanning. You calm down the whole nervous system. You calm down, if you want to get a little weird with me here, you calm down the whole subtle body energy system and give it a nice wash and a nice clean. Then there's less pain. The body's more settled. It's easier to sit. Everything else you do will then be easier. Then you open the tactile sense gate completely and make it less reactive so that it doesn't matter if pleasure is appearing, which can be very distracting as you get better at meditation. I mean, I don't want to say this really because it makes it sound like I'm being a bit arrogant about my capabilities or something. But this is not a major capability, okay? Just sitting here with you today, I was experiencing unbelievable bodily bliss. And so part of my struggle in my session tonight was the task, for example, with vision, is not to be blissed out with the blissful tactile sensations that come up because of concentration. The task is to observe the visual field. And so there's a struggle of fighting the attention to not chase the tactile sensation of bliss, for example. To prepare yourself for that inevitability, you train in opening the tactile sense gate. Why? So that it's non-reactive. It doesn't matter if pain appears or if bliss appears, that consciousness can rest open like a mirror without chasing things in the tactile field. You see? Then you open the vision so that if something appears in the visual field, even if you have it closed, you'll see these sparkles of light and things appear. Again, it's not a spiritual thing. That's just something that happens. Doesn't matter if something appears in the visual field because you have trained it to be non-reactive. Whatever appears there, the mind simply abides on what's there. Then you train the auditory field. You keep it fully wide open so that it doesn't chase and grab onto some sound that happens to occur over here or happens to occur over there. Eventually, you do it also with smell. You do it also with taste. Yeah. Once you've done this and you can hold all 5 of them open, or at least vision, sound, and tactile open, then you turn it to consciousness. And at that point, you can see very clearly, very logically, why it would be easier to, first of all, isolate mental contents, right? Right now, your mental contents and your sensory experiences are mixed up and jumbled. Sometimes you're not sure if you're hearing it or you're imagining it. Sometimes you're not sure if you're having a feeling or a thought about a feeling. It's kind of jumbled in your experience. But because you've trained in observing each of the senses in isolation, now it's very clear what is my mind and what is my senses. So you've done 2 things. One, you've made the senses non-reactive so that you can pull attention inwards and it won't get pulled out as easily by stuff stimulating the senses. And 2, it's very clear to you. It's very, very clear to you what is stuff coming from the senses and what is not. Which means you can observe mental content with less confusion about what is mental content. You see? So this is the method to my madness. You start with Foundation 1, you learn to generate some concentration, then you do body scanning. And since we're real people, we're trying to take this into the real world, you train in standing meditation so that you can do it while you're standing. You train in walking meditation so you can do it while you're walking. And then when you train in opening the sense gates is something you can do at any time. So when you're riding on the bus, when you're riding on a train, when you're at work and there's a short break, or when you're at a meeting and you need to listen to what your boss is saying at work and you open the auditory gate like 60% and you put the other 40% on what they're saying, for example. So then you're training in concentration all the time. And then by the time you get to your evening session's way more profound because you started with this work in the morning, carried it on a little bit, sort of sprinkled in throughout the day, and then did it in the evening, right? Full on once again. Or you sprinkled it in throughout the day, had a good night's sleep, woke up the next day, and your next session's pretty good, right? So then the only other layer really is that we, as real people, we have problems. Some of us are angry, some of us are a little bit delusional, some of us are filled with doubts and anxieties, some of us are filled with way too much desire, and some of us, our problem is envy or jealousy. Some people are spiteful. Some people are arrogant. For years, arrogance was my big problem. I have a new big problem now. But, arrogance still sometimes comes up. So rumination meditation is Foundation 5, which allows you to reshape all of these emotional patterns and attitudes and motivations and intentions that are on the surface of the mind, so that the overall quality of the mind when you're not actively training in something is better. And therefore, your ethics will be better, your life will be less chaotic. And once again, what you can accomplish on the cushion will get better and better over time as you address the major problems that you have in terms of your personality, basically. Right? So this is, in brief, why I've arranged things in the way that I have. And something like rumination meditation only makes a lot of sense in my humble view if you already have some ability to concentrate, which is why it's, again, Foundation 5 and not Foundation 1. Right. You can also see probably how Foundation 5, if you had more control over your mental contents, will begin to feed back onto Foundation 4, where you're opening the sense gates and then eventually observing consciousness itself. When you're observing consciousness itself, and you've already have a lot of experience generating particular types of mental content on purpose, well, now you're also very clear about what mental content is. All of this stuff happening on the surface, you've been working with that. You know how to deliberately generate certain kinds of thoughts, certain kinds of emotions, certain kinds of attitudes. You're very aware of when that's happening sort of naturally by itself and when you're doing it on purpose. And so you gain more experience of your internal world that allows your meditation on consciousness itself to become more profound. You see? So what I'm giving you is this roadmap of being able to gain deeper and more profound experiences of your whole being. And really, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you were to take these techniques as I've laid them out to any school of meditation that I'm aware of. There's not much out there that wouldn't fit into these 5 categories. If you were doing mantra, for example, that might fit into Foundation 1. You could use mantra to train concentration instead of the breath. Something like visualization could also stand in sort of that role by the time you get to about Foundation 2. So if you train in visualizations, you can continue to traverse the path of concentration. I just think that some of these other practices aren't as effective as they could be for lay people, which is why I've collected the things that really work if you're not going to be in retreat and you don't have time to build up all the skills of visualization that make those practices work really well, at least at this stage, et cetera, right? Okay. I've been talking for 10 minutes, so I should probably answer some questions. Let's see. I have a lot of trouble not visualizing things. I imagine all the body parts being scanned before getting rid of it and just focusing on the sensation. That is an extraordinarily common problem. In particular with the body, people tend to visualize the part of the body rather than just becoming aware of that part of the body. And it takes a bit of time, I think, for those people who are used to visualizing their body rather than feeling their body to just feel their body and not imagine it. You know? Sorry, give me just 1 second. I need to change the lighting in here. Sorry, I should have turned that on earlier. Let's see. Makes sense because of a lot of random crap when looking at my consciousness. Yeah, everybody has a lot of random crap when they're looking at their consciousness. That's just the normal state of affairs. Oh. So hopefully the experience tonight has shown you why quite a few of these guided meditations, et cetera, that don't first give you all of the skills that are required to be successful in meditating on consciousness itself aren't going to be very effective. They could be effective if you had a long time. For example, if you were going to go into retreat for 5 days and do virtually nothing other than observe consciousness, that technique can work. But you need a lot of time to marinate in that practice to get to the level we were tonight. To get to where we were tonight, you probably need like 2 or 3 days of doing that self-observation practice as an isolated practice 8 hours a day. We did it in about 55 minutes, maybe 50 minutes, right? And some of you don't have that much experience. So, yeah, I don't know. Let's see. Focus was fine on the other senses, but when we went to the mind consciousness, I just had the song Mad World playing in my head. So here's the thing with observing mental content. When we did vision, for example, the instruction wasn't, the instruction was not to get out a paintbrush and paint exactly what you want to see and put it in front of yourself and look at the painting. The instruction was your eyes, or not your eyes, but your visual consciousness is already like a mirror. That's how it is. That's what it does. And it's going to reflect whatever happens to appear here in the visual field. And your job is to pull back your tendency for your awareness to follow all those movements and things, and instead to remain like a mirror no matter what appears here. So in exactly the same way, exactly the same way, when you're observing consciousness in what I sometimes say in an in an intentionless, choiceless, mirror-like state, awareness remains in a choiceless, intentionless, mirror-like state, not deciding to do anything. It is simply existing as it is. What mind does is give rise to stuff and be aware of what it's been given rise to. Like the visualized apple. It visualizes the apple and it is aware of the apple, right? So the mind does both of these jobs. It's like a, well, I guess I'm already connected here, right? So the mind is doing both jobs. It's like those puppet shows where the two puppets are talking, but it's actually one person. Right? So your mind is giving rise to this stuff that the mind is experiencing. Hence it is non-dual. It's not two. Yeah. So it doesn't matter what appears in front of the awareness of the in the mind's eye, right? Sometimes they say the theater of the mind, as if the consciousness is sort of sitting in the audience and there's a film on the screen here. It doesn't matter what film comes on in the screen, you just stay in the seat and don't move. And whatever film happens to appear there, you don't get up and get involved in the film and you know, if it's a theater, you don't get on stage and start acting with the actors. You stay over here in the audience and you observe the play as the play is going on. Right? And it doesn't matter what the play is. It doesn't matter if they start playing Mad World on the stage. It doesn't matter if they start doing reruns of Your Bad Relationship. It doesn't matter if they start doing reruns of Your Good Relationship. You don't get involved. You don't make a choice. You don't form an intent. You simply remain like a mirror, an audience member, as the play goes on. And sometimes the play stops for a while, and you just remain in a mirror-like state with no content. And then the play starts again. And then it stops for a while, and then it starts again. And you start to get a sense of what the audience member is, what consciousness is, usually during the times that there's a gap. You see? And then eventually, you'll have more interesting experiences because of this. But yeah, that's maybe a story for another day. Let's see. The mind is crazy. Yeah. Our minds are a little bit nuts. Visualization can be fun. Imagination can be fun. Sam, that I agree with you. Visualizations can be very fun. Visualization practices are very, very important in the Tibetan tradition, which is the tradition I'm most familiar with. The Tibetan tradition uses visualization practices to, hey, how you doing, Natty? To totally lost my train of thought. Oh, visualizations can be very fun, very interesting, very beneficial. So the Tibetan tradition uses visualization practices enormously. And I was talking with Cleric about this, and I'll just recap it briefly because it's worth hearing. So, for example, consider the deity Akala. Let me pull up Akala. Yeah. Let's get a good look at Akala. There it is. Okay, I'll hop over there. So that's Akala. I'm kind of blocking it, aren't I? Let me see. Slide myself over. Oh, nope, that's not a good idea. That's the best I can do. So looking at Akala, you can see Akala's color is either dark blue or black. Why is this? Why is this deity in a blue-black color? Because the sky is blue or black, right? Generally speaking. And your consciousness is like space. So space is what this deity represents. This space-like quality of consciousness is what this deity is indicating. And then you can see this deity has a wrathful expression, right? So why is it a wrathful expression? Because this deity is this deity, in other words, your consciousness and the experience of consciousness in the absence, like in the way that we were just doing, very forcefully, intensely cuts through all of your BS. So since abiding on consciousness very forcefully, intensely cuts through all your BS, right? Your exaggerated perceptions of pleasure, your exaggerated perceptions of pain, when you're observing with the bodily tactile sense open, with the tactile sense gate open, for example, pleasure, pain, it's just like in the mirror there, and the main quality is bliss. And so this deity has a wrathful expression because it is very forcefully cutting through these problems that you have. And then you can see it's holding a sword. So Akala holds a sword, which is the sword of wisdom. Once again, this sword is to cut through these negative emotions. So Akala cuts through these negative emotions with great force. Also, this is a bit more of a Buddhist-y thing, but there's a reason that we're carrying a sword. It's because the sword represents wisdom in the Buddhist tradition. It represents the quality of being able to cut through to the ultimate nature of something. So sometimes I say that you're going to rest in the fundamental nature of vision, for example, when you do opening the visual sense gate. Yeah, I'm sure you've all heard me say that by now. So if you're resting in the conventional nature, if you're resting in the fundamental nature, what I mean is that all that's there are the fundamental properties of vision. In other words, giving rise to visual phenomenon, visual things, and being aware of visual things. Those are the fundamental properties of the visual consciousness. And so those fundamental properties, if you analyze the self, what role the self plays in these two fundamental properties, you find out the self doesn't play any role in these two fundamental properties. The visual consciousness doesn't need a self to generate some experience and to experience that experience. There's no self in between. It's just the vision. Sometimes, as I've said before, I've had some of my students say, when you experience vision just as it is, it's as if what's being seen is seeing, or what's seeing is what's being seen. There's a collapse between the experience and the experiencer, because that's actually how vision is. Even from a Western cognitive psychological perspective, your visual consciousness, your visual processing faculties are what are creating the vision, but normally you don't notice that. If you train in opening the visual sense gate, you'll notice it. And to do that, to generate and experience visual stuff, doesn't require the self that you thought was running everything. You thought there was like a big me in there that made it all work and that you were seeing. No, you're not seeing. Visual consciousness is seeing. And so Fudomyo Akala here is carrying this sword because by opening the various consciousness gates, you will cut through the inappropriate or exaggerated sense of self that you have. And therefore, this type of meditation also can very quickly lead to what Buddhists refer to as wisdom practice. And then finally, Akala is carrying a rope. So why is Akala carrying a rope? Akala carries a rope because the rope is actually a lasso, is used for grabbing other beings, right, and tying them up. But what it really means is not that you're lassoing other beings and tying them up. It means that you're helping other beings overcome their negative emotions. You're helping other beings gain realization because you have incredible compassion. So Akala represents, on the one hand, the fundamental properties of consciousness, like space, black in color, dark blue in color, wisdom, and the fundamental nature of consciousness, both forcefully cutting through your negative emotions, your problems, your BS. And then both of those giving rise to this intense desire to be of benefit to others and help them cure their suffering too, to bring them to happiness too. So that's what this image represents. So in the Tibetan tradition, you might visualize a deity, for example, like this, but it is packed full of all of the information we just discussed. Yeah. So it's packed full of all this information. And then on top of that, you would imagine that all of the realized beings who have already done all this work, who have already realized the nature of their minds, and in particular your own gurus who have spent decades training their minds, studying, putting in effort, training, so that they could benefit you, right? That the minds of all of these beings enters into this deity. Yeah? That it all enters into the visualized deity. So now, through seeing this deity in your imagination, and through imagining that the minds of all of these great beings have entered and are now sort of inhabiting the deity, you're making these incredible connections in your mind between the fact that consciousness is transformative in this way, and all of your teachers have the information you need to transform your consciousness in this way. And you're representing your own consciousness's potential to be transformed in this way. So you're building layer upon layer upon layer of meaning. And then what do? Then you do your prostrations, right? Then you do your prostrations to this visualized deity. And think about the psychologically transformative effect of completely prostrating yourself to the ground 100,000 times, for example, in the presence of uh, all of your teachers, all the realized beings represented in the form of the fundamental nature of consciousness that you already possess and can be transformed into. You see? So this is it. This is how you use visualization. And then when you start talking about more advanced practices that are coming out of the lesser, not the lesser, but the lower tantras and the other tantras and so forth, in terms of information that's publicly available, then you're transforming the entire environment through these kinds of visualizations. And you're building layer upon layer upon layer upon layer upon layer, hundreds, thousands of intricate connections of symbolic meaning, so that in a single image, you can generate the entire path of transformation. In a single image, you can generate the understandings of the entire path of realization. A little bit like a mind palace in the Western corpus. So visualizations can be extremely powerful. And then on top of that, there's also this really interesting fact that wherever you place your mind, your subtle body system tends to pool energy, tends to pool the winds or the prana or the kundalini, as the case may be. And so you can use visualization to pool more of your awareness in one place to cause certain effects to happen relative to the subtle body, for example. For what it's worth. But again, all of these things are extremely well described, extremely detailed. Anytime you start talking about working with those levels of visualization, not just visualizing a deity, but all the rest of it in terms of Tantra, or a fair amount of the Taoist stuff that does the same thing. You really need teachers that have a full transmission and significant realizations in those systems to do it, or you're going to hurt yourself. Either nothing will happen, which is the best outcome, or you'll screw it up somehow and hurt yourself. A lot of people have either lost their minds or screwed up their psychology pretty seriously by doing those practices without proper guidance. Right. Yeah. But then imagine this, okay? I'm way too excited to stop because we've come this far. Listen, this is incredible. This is absolutely incredible. So here's how sophisticated these yogis were. They said, okay, we know how concentration works. We know how the symbolic system of the conceptual mind works. We know how the subtle body works. We know how sound affects the body in various ways. What if we took all of this and we put it into one package to maximize the benefits that someone could get out of a single session? So we'll put them in a package together called a means of accomplishment, a sadhana, so that someone can go through this process and trigger a huge amount, hundreds of thousands of symbolic meanings, while also training in concentration, while also refining the subtle body, while also using sound to enhance the various stages, or at least enhance the practice at some stage in the process. So this is what they do in the tantras. But all of those hundreds of thousands of layers of meaning and symbol and so forth only work if you've done like years of rumination meditation on all of the steps and stages of the path. That what imbues those with meaning is that as soon as you see the lasso, for example, you generate actual compassion. Universal compassion for every single being without exception. So powerful that according to the even modern cognitive science, that it's more powerful than the love a mother has for her only child. And I'm not exaggerating this or making this up. Mingyur Rinpoche, who's a greatly accomplished yogi, modern yogi, had a brain scan done. They looked at his neurological activity when he generated compassion, and it was something like 700 times outside the normal range for human empathy. So as soon as you see the lasso, bang, you can generate compassion immediately. That's so to do that, you have to train. You have to train your mind. It doesn't just happen randomly. Okay, so we have about 12 people on the stream. I know I have it pinned there, but if you have questions about meditation training, yada yada yada, put them in the chat. Yeah, Sam says that's a God state. Cleric says, no, Akala is pissed off at the delusions clouding your mind. There's also this element of wrathfulness that's important in the tantras, which they say is a bit like if your kid was about to reach out and touch fire, or in my case, when I was a kid, I folded up a fork and I put it in a light socket, Might explain a few things. But when you see your child doing that, a mother in particular will run over and smack the hand of their child, right? If you see your child about to electrocute themselves and die, you will make the consequences painful enough for your child that they don't do something that is life-alteringly harmful for themselves, right? That may actually, in fact, end their life. And so, yes, there is also this element that when you combine compassion and wisdom and the fundamental nature of consciousness, that sometimes realized beings they're not nice, They look at your suffering and they go, you have no idea what you're doing. And if you don't stop, it's going to be so bad, you can't even imagine it. And since you can't imagine it, I'm just going to stop you from doing it. And my teachers did that to me on several occasions. Not all of my actually, my first teacher, who I was with for about 12 years before he passed, was incredibly stern. I mean, incredibly stern. I mean, kicked me out of class on several occasions. And sometimes made it very clear that if I didn't shape up, he wasn't going to let me come back. So, yeah, that aspect of being wrathful to stop you from doing stupid shit is very much a real thing in these systems. And if you'd love to see a wonderful example of that on steroids, there's a documentary I can recommend to you called Carving the Divine. Carving the Divine. It's about people who carve wooden Buddhist statues in Japan, and the hardcore training they go through to be able to do that. Okay, let's see. I think I'm caught up on the chat now. Oh yeah, someone mentioned that it's kind of like a godlike state to be able to have compassion that's that profound. It is. It's it very much is like a godlike state to have compassion that's that profound. I very often, when people are new and are really only have experience with the Christian tradition, I sometimes mention that universal love, it's a bit like this concept agape in Christianity, where you have a type of genuine concern for how it turns out that you extend to all sentient beings. And to be able to do that, you need to train in first having them be equal in your mind in the relevant sense. Because if you have bias towards some, where you like some of them a lot and you hate some of them a lot, and you just don't give a crap about most of them, if you have these biases in your mind as your natural way of thinking about all sentient beings, then yeah, loving your neighbor, this is way more than loving your neighbor, you know. I don't know how far down the rabbit hole I want to go with this. If you guys are enjoying this, hit the like button. Hit the like button. You know, make sure that the algorithm knows that this is worth watching for the next person. Loving your neighbors. Yeah, so this is way more than loving your neighbor. Way, way, way more. When you look at gosh, I just don't know. I just don't know if I want to go down the rabbit hole on this. If you guys would like to hear more, tell me, and I'll tell you more on this subject. But this subject can get quite intense. So let me see. Again, we have the delay. So by the time you hear this, I will have seen your comment, and then you'll have to catch up. It'll be about 15 seconds. You'll think I'm just sitting around talking to myself. Okay. I'll give you one example about this compassion training. So we talked earlier in the stream about how when you look at consciousness itself, you're doing the visualized apple exercise, you realize that visualized images break like at least half the laws of physics. Then you realize, okay, well, consciousness is this really unique instrument in reality that can observe this thing that no physical instrument on the planet can observe. It can give rise to this apple that no physical instrument on Earth can measure. Even my own eyes can't see this apple that I'm visualizing. I can't hear the apple with my ears. I can't smell it, taste it, touch it. With nothing designed for interacting with physical stuff can affect this visualized apple whatsoever. It's extremely unusual. And so the thing generating the apple and seeing the apple must be equally strange by logical extension. So since this apple seems to exist basically outside the laws of time and space as we understand them, therefore the thing generating and knowing this apple must also exist, relatively speaking. Again, I'm being a bit sort of flip and brief, but outside the laws of time and space as we understand them. Therefore, since consciousness is not coming from your brain, at least at the fundamental level, yes, it's associated with your brain for basically every human function, but at the fundamental level, the basal consciousness, the first moment of that in the womb didn't come from the coming together of the genetic material of your parents. It must have come from somewhere else. If that's the case, then you must have been reborn from somewhere else. If that's the case, according to Buddhism, there's actually no first moment of reality. There's no first there's a first moment for this universe. Listen carefully. There's a first moment for this universe. There's no first moment for reality or existence. So according to Buddhism, we don't have to solve the problem of where did the universe come from in the same way as is put forward by Christian theologians, for example, because existence has always existed. Every moment of reality came from a previous moment of an existent reality. It didn't come from some other thing that existed that's completely unlike everything else. That would just create a huge number of other problems. It came from a bunch of other stuff that is like what's here now. It came from conscious beings like ourselves, and it came from streams of physical things also, but mainly from conscious beings. There's a sutta where the Buddha says that all of the elements making up physical reality ultimately dissolve back into consciousness. That doesn't mean that they are consciousness right now, but ultimately they dissolve back into consciousness at some point at the end of the universe. So, long story short, since reality in general and rebirth in general have no beginning, every single sentient being, every single conscious being has at one time had every conceivable relationship with you. So, since every single sentient being has had every conceivable relationship with you, every single sentient being has been your mother. Some of you may not have the best relationship with your mother, but that's not the point. If you consider the archetype of the mother, or think of someone's mother who was really, really good to their kids, if you didn't have a good relationship with yours or don't know yours very well, and consider it like this. Every single sentient being has at one time been that most incredible mother, and at a minimum, carried you in the womb for 9 months. Couldn't lay how they wanted to lay, couldn't eat how they wanted to eat, couldn't sleep how they wanted to sleep. And even when you kicked them, when you kicked your mother from the inside, causing her great pain, she said, "Oh, my child's getting so strong." She was so happy, even when you caused her pain. This, your incredible mother, who, as you tore out of her, again, was so happy that you had come into the world. Your mother, who for at least a year, if not 2 years, if she left you alone, probably for even 30 minutes, there was a good chance you were going to die, gave up everything so that you could live, so that you could thrive, gave up her dreams for years. Every single sentient being, every person you've ever met, every insect you've ever killed, every pet you've ever had, every person who's ever cut you off in traffic, every person who's ever looked at you wrong, every person who's ever broken your heart, every person who's ever mended your heart, every person who you've ever hated in politics, every person you've ever loved in politics, every animal you've ever eaten, every single sentient being has been your dear mother. And in addition to that, what this means is that you have 10 mothers, 100 mothers, 1,000 mothers, 10,000 mothers, 100,000 mothers, 1,000,000 mothers, 10 million mothers, 100 million dear mothers, 1,000,000,000 dear mothers, 10 billion dear mothers, 100 billion dear mothers, 1,000,000,000,000 dear mothers, 10 trillion, 100 trillion. You have infinite dear mothers who have again and again and again been your dear mother over and 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 over. And so Atisha, Venerable Atisha, he went and trained with his dear Lama, Venerable Serlingpa. And he trained, I believe, for 8 years in rumination meditation involving this contemplation. And it was said that every single time, sorry, it was said that every single time Atisha saw anyone, he he would go to them and say, "Hello, mother." That's what he saw first. When he saw anyone, that's what he saw first. He saw their infinite sacrifice, their infinite kindness first. Hello, my dear mother. So the great reviver of Tibetan Buddhism, the crown jewel of the Nalanda monastery tradition, who was invited by the Tibetans to Tibet to revive their entire system, Venerable Atisha, was this incredible saint. And that was, I think, around I can't remember now, maybe 8th or 9th or 10th century. And then Venerable Asanga, this is now 2nd century, he went into a cave to do meditation because he wanted to meet Maitreya, the next Buddha. He wanted to see him directly. So he spent 3 years in a cave. And I'm not going to get the order of these signs right. So if you look this up later, it's going to be wrong, but I'll do my best. So Venerable Asanga, who was already, I think, a fairly accomplished scholar at least, he went into meditation in a cave for 3 years. And he didn't see Maitreya. He didn't see the future Buddha. The Buddha wouldn't appear to him. And so he left the cave. And then he, on the way back down from the mountain to the monastery, he saw a person with a piece of silk. And they were sort of whipping a boulder or wiping a boulder. You know, they were just sort of waving this silk on the boulder. And he said, what in the world are you doing? And this person said, I'm cutting the boulder in half. I'm sawing it in half. And Venerable Asanga thought, my goodness, if this totally ordinary person has the willpower to take all the time that it would take to cut a boulder in half using a piece of silk for some conventional purpose, I assume, I just have to go back into retreat. I can't abandon this much more noble endeavor based upon the fact that I didn't get it done in 3 years. And so he goes back into retreat for 3 more years, Venerable Asanga. And he doesn't accomplish his goal. He doesn't see the future Buddha. He doesn't see Maitreya. And so he leaves the cave again. And as he's stepping out of the cave, he sees a hole where the bats have been flying in and out. And this hole is completely smooth and has become large from the bats, just the wings just touching the hole over and over and over again, just slowly wearing it down for long time. And he thinks, wow, you know, if bats who are just going out there to eat and whatever every day and find water, whatever. If they have worn this giant hole down over hundreds of years just for some conventional purpose, think about, again, how noble, how important this task is I've set for myself. I need to go back into retreat. And so he goes back into retreat. And I can't remember what the last thing was. There was another thing that happened, but he comes back out, he starts to head down, and something else happens, and he realizes, oh my goodness, I have to go back and try one more time. And so after 12 years of practice, he still hadn't seen Maitreya Buddha. And so he's finally actually determined to leave. And so he leaves the cave and he starts heading down the mountain back to the monastery. And on the way, on the road, he sees a dog, a stray dog. And overwhelmed by compassion, just like Venerable Letitia, my dear mother, right? Overwhelmed by compassion because this dog is starving, laying on the side of the road, has a big gash on his leg. And in the gash, in this cut on the dog's leg, this dog must be on the edge of life, There are maggots in the wound, squirming around. And he looks at the situation and he's just completely shattered. He goes, I have to do something. And so he cuts a little piece of his own leg out and lays it on the ground. And his plan is to take the maggots out of the dog's wound and put it onto his little piece of flesh that he's cut so that they won't die, right? I mean, again, this is the level of concern he has for all of his dear mothers here on the side of the road. But he realizes that he can't take the maggots out of the festering dog's terrible wound with his hands because he'll crush the maggots because they're so fragile. And he doesn't want to kill any of these beings. So with a sense of disgust, he closes his eyes and he puts out his tongue. Think about this. A stray dog on the edge of life in India on the side of the road with a festering wound filled with maggots. And the depth of his compassion tells him, the only way I can safely get the maggots out of the wound is to use my tongue. So he closes his eyes and he leans down with his tongue, and there's nothing. And so he opens his eyes, and Maitreya is standing in front of him after 12 years. And Venerable Asanga says, where were you? Where were you? 12 years. And Maitreya shows him his robe that he's wearing. And on Maitreya's robe, there's signs that he had been standing right in front of Asanga the whole time. There was something that Asanga was doing where you could see it on his robe. And so Asanga was angry and he said, where were you for 12 years? And he said, I was there all the time. But you couldn't see because you because you hadn't fully developed compassion for all sentient beings. So I had to appear as this dog. And when you generated compassion, it removed what was stopping you from seeing me. But I was here all the time. And so Asanga picked up Maitreya and was so happy he started running through the nearest village. And it said that, you know, he was yelling, "Look, I have Maitreya, the future Buddha, on my shoulders." And he's running around, "Look, look, look," you know. And everybody thought it was just this crazy guy, you know. Just imagine some guy living by himself in a cave for 12 years. And it said that nobody in the village could see anything. They couldn't see anything at all. He was just him running around. And there was one old lady that saw him carrying a dog, but everyone else, they didn't see anything at all. So this compassion, the development of compassion, is from a Buddhist standpoint, is on the one hand, well, the development of compassion is unbelievably important from a Buddhist standpoint. It is divine, and it extends so far beyond what we consider quote unquote compassion or love in an ordinary sense that it's not even funny. And there are countless stories in the Buddhist tradition about the power of fully developed universal love, universal compassion, which people spend years, sometimes decades, working on and developing and making more powerful. So, yeah, it is divine. This was all started because Sam said in the chat that compassion is divine. It is divine. It is a doorway, according to the great saints, to actual great spiritual capability. You know? And of course, also from a conventional standpoint, if you generate compassion, I mean, this is not a casual endeavor. There's a whole bunch of steps and stages, and you know, Nat, who's in the chat now, she did retreat with me, and we did at the end of that retreat a 3-hour session where we generated some concentration, and then we spent, I think, about 2.5 hours going through the whole process of trying to generate compassion. And I don't know how everyone else did, but I got like maybe 5 minutes or something, or maybe 10, 15 minutes or something like this towards the end. It's very difficult to overcome all the ordinary biases and generate this condition in your mind. It's very hard. But if you can do it, it's incredible. It's incredible. It makes everything better. And if you are into karma and rebirth and that sort of thing, I'll give you one last little nibble on the karma and rebirth side, and then, you know, we've been here a little while now. I'm sure you guys have other things to do. So in the Pali Canon, in the Theravadan tradition, there's a I don't know if it's a Jataka technically. Jatakas are instances where the Buddha was telling people about his own past lives. So I don't know if it's technically a Jataka or not, but there's one occasion where the Buddha was describing how it was that he took rebirth. Yeah, sorry, just to divert for a second. During that retreat, I told a particular story that Atisha saw a really horrific circumstance, because Atisha, again, is a great yogi and was constantly using clairvoyance to do all sorts of things, according to the sources that write about his biography, which is part of the reason he was so highly regarded, in addition to being an absolutely unbelievable scholar, according to his own monastery and the Tibetans. But I told a particularly horrific kind of story about something that he saw happening, because he could see this family and who they were in previous lives, and the machinations that happen because of this are just, maybe we'll cover it another time. And now I lost my train of thought. What was I talking about? Oh, in the Polycanon. So in the Polycanon, the Buddha describes there's this mental state, this attitude called metta. So metta is sometimes translated friendliness or loving kindness, but it takes a lot of description to really, really, really understand what's being described there. What's being described there, I think, is best understood as, think about, if you have a Christian background or are familiar with Christian theology, think about Christ on the cross, and people have been torturing him for days, wrongly. They're still torturing and mocking him. And his only thought is, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing. For us, most of us, probably myself included, we would be thinking, I hope these people die horribly. But for Jesus on the cross, the only overwhelming thought is, I hope nothing bad happens to these people. They don't know what they're doing. This is going to be so bad for them. His sole concern at the edge of death, unbelievable pain, torture for days, ridicule for days, is the welfare of those precious beings in front of him. Likewise, there's a gentleman by the name of Palden Gyatso. There's a book that he wrote, Fire Under the Ice. He was captured by the he was captured by the Chinese. He's a Tibetan monk, and he was in a he was in a Chinese labor camp. So Palden Gyatso was captured as a Tibetan monk, went into a Chinese labor camp. He was tortured daily in horrific ways that I probably shouldn't describe on a YouTube live stream, including doing things to him that can't be mentioned, in every place on his body for years. Cattle prods, boiling oil. I mean, unimaginable. When he escaped, the Dalai Lama asked him, were you ever afraid? And what he meant was, were you afraid to die? And Palden Gyatso says, I was afraid I might lose my compassion for the people that were torturing me. I was afraid I might lose my compassion for the people torturing me. Now, I know Jesus suffered on the cross for a few, and he suffered for a few days before that. But we're talking about 20 years of verbal abuse, physical abuse, torture, being brought to the edge of death repeatedly. And his sole concern, his deepest worry and fear, is that he would stop having compassion for these people. In other words, that he would stop worrying that he would stop having genuine, deep concern for the welfare and happiness of the people that were causing him pain every single day for 20 years. So this is how powerful we're talking about when we talk about loving kindness, metta, and karuna, compassion. This is how powerful we're talking about. We're not just talking about feeling warm and fuzzy when you see puppies, or being nice to your friends, or not harming your enemies overtly. This is so far beyond ordinary compassion that they're not even in the same category. So the Buddha said that on one occasion in one of his past lives, he spent 8 years doing nothing but meditating on metta, which is desiring happiness for all beings, wishing that all beings had happiness and the causes of happiness. So he spent 8 years training in meditation on metta. And he said that when he passed away from that life, he was immediately born in the highest heavenly realms. And that he was reborn there again and again and again and again. And then from there, he was reborn in the levels down from this. So in Buddhism, there's a bunch of heavenly realms in different layers. And so then he was born in the successive layers as the karma from this started to exhaust. But he had already been up there for trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of years, hundreds of lifetimes lasting trillions of years each, as he's coming down through these incredible layers of bliss in various heavenly realms. He said, and then for thousands of lifetimes, I was born as what's called a wheel-turning monarch. A wheel-turning monarch is a person that is basically the king of a planet. So ruling over an entire planet as the king. He said, so for thousands of lifetimes, I was born like this. He said, and then I was born as like regional kings, regional leaders of countries and things. So it took him trillions of years and probably millions of lifetimes to exhaust the karma of spending 8 years of meditating on the wish. Just the wish, just the attitude, not even actually doing anything yet, just having the attitude alone of desiring for other beings to have happiness and the causes of happiness. So whether or not you believe in rebirth, just take the point on board that, and whether or not you believe in sort of celestial Buddhas who can come down and meet you after 12 years in a cave, and whether or not you believe that all beings have infinitely, repeatedly been your mother, your kind mother, whether or not you believe any of these things, take on board that, at least from a Buddhist perspective, that this quality of universal loving compassion is unbelievably important, right? Just indescribably important, and considered to be almost, what word can I use besides incredible, amazing, whatever? There's no comparing it. It's incomparable in terms of the benefits it provides. Loving kindness, compassion, and there's another one if you're doing Mahayana practice called bodhicitta, which comes out of compassion. That the benefits, the karmic benefits, the psychological benefits, the benefits in terms of your practice are just astronomical, according to the tradition. So that's my weird Buddhist-y down the rabbit hole stuff on compassion. It is beyond the divine. In Buddhism, the highest class of deities, before you get into formless realms, which are actually just states of concentration, are the Brahmas. And these mental states, loving kindness and compassion, there's another one called rejoicing in English, and another one called equanimity. These four are called the Brahma Viras, the divine, the highest possible divine mental states. Yeah. So whether or not you believe that by generating those, that potentially one day you might see a Buddha, or that your rebirth will be good, generating them has real practical benefits. For example, if you happened to be put in a gulag for 20 years, instead of sitting around unbelievable mental suffering, you could spend your time abiding in karuna, in universal compassion, which would be much more pleasant. And by the way, wouldn't stop you from escaping, which is what Palden Gyatso ultimately did, was escape. And when he escaped, he didn't just escape for himself. He took the implements of torture. He took the things that were being used to torture him with him out of compassion so that he could show to the world how much suffering was going on in these camps and hopefully make the suffering less, both for the people that are doing the torture, because harming other people is not good for you. And also, of course, for the people that are being tortured, right? It goes without saying. And so he took the extra risk of bringing proof out of his situation in order to benefit both the people torturing him and the other people who he left behind. So this is the power of compassion. It benefits you even here and now. It's good now. And if it turns out the Buddha and the other great saints are right about rebirth, the benefits are astronomical as you depart this life. So I cannot speak about the benefits of this practice any more highly than I have, I think. In terms of how difficult it is to do, I know someone who spent about 4 years just working on the first step, equanimity. So it's not easy to generate these states. It really isn't. And if you want to make them just the everyday way that you engage with your life, it takes a lot of work. But these mental states will enhance your ability to train in meditation more generally, because it's a much better state of mind to be carrying around all day than your normal bias and BS and getting angry at everything and getting impatient at stuff and then lusting after this. And, it's a much more stable state of mind. So to bring it back to the point of this live stream. Hey, we made it. Okay. What's your opinion on plant medicines or psychedelics to advance realization? It's interesting you bring that up, because I was just talking with somebody else about that earlier today in the comment section of the Tukdam documentary commentary. Here's my thoughts on psychedelics. In my humble view, because I don't know for sure, but in my humble view, think about it using the movie projector analogy, okay? Your mind is in the business of producing reality. So reality as you see it is like the movie happening on the screen. Your mind is like the projector screen and the film being spun through the projector. When you take a psychedelic, you change the movie reel out for something totally bizarre, right? And most of your attention goes to the movie screen, and you're looking at all of the weird stuff that appears on the screen. Because what does your mind do? Your mind generates experiences, and it knows those experiences. This is its primary job. So most of what you're seeing and experiencing is your mind generating experiences and being aware of those experiences and not being able to distinguish between the stuff it made up inside the mind as basically in the theater of consciousness and stuff that's coming from the external five senses. It loses the ability to distinguish between the stuff it makes up in the theater of consciousness and the stuff that's actually coming through the five senses. And it mixes the two. It's already in the business of mixing the two, actually, because when you were looking at your... No. What's a good example of this? So it's already in the business of mixing those two. For example, let me just give you one quick one. If you were a Russian language speaker, a monolingual Russian language speaker, and somebody showed you a dark blue patch of color and a light blue patch of color, your brain will say two different colors. In the same way that my brain, as an English speaker, would say blue and red are two different colors. So our brain has a different way of signaling neurologically that the stimulus has changed really dramatically. And you get that signal that, oh, this is a really new, novel experience when you change colors completely, not when you change colors within the same hue. So dark red and light red in the same hue won't trigger that for me and won't trigger that for the Russian speaker. However, the Russian speaker, unlike myself, has two different words, one for dark blue and one for light blue. And those are considered in the Russian language, not like our language would say, here's blue, and here's light blue here, and here's dark blue here. They're part of one thing. Russian language says, here's dark blue, here's light blue, and by the way, here's red. These are all different things. And so their brain goes different. So your mind mixes when you see the color, right? Your mind gets, your senses get stimulated in a certain way. It goes in, your mind processes it, mixes it with language, and then presents it to you as a visual image that is a mixture of your expectations, your past experiences, and language. So what you're sitting in, as I sometimes say, is not the room. What you're sitting in is your mind. So when you take a psychedelic, your mind loses some of its ability to distinguish between its contents and all of these linguistic things that it does and its ability to recognize patterns. It just starts to sort of, right? It just sort of becomes this storm of symbolic meaning and language and whatever. And that then is presented to you as the room that you're sitting in, because it's already generating the room you're sitting in. On very, very, very rare occasion, a hallucinogen may, could, potentially, sometimes give you a deeper insight into the projector that's projecting the film, this weird now psychedelic film, instead of tonight's, matinee, or this afternoon's matinee. It's now presenting, I don't know, Pulp Fiction. Now, occasionally, because of the insanity of what is now being presented as, the reality, the mind will sort of turn back on itself and look at the projector and go, oh, wow, consciousness. And then humbly again, consciousness is actually this non-physical, non-spatial, in some cases, non-temporal thing that extends out actually, again, humbly, beyond the body. And there are subtler layers of consciousness that can extend a very long ways, etc. And so occasionally I think you take hallucinogens and the mind turns around and looks at the projection device, which is consciousness, and it sees what consciousness is actually like. But that experience is mixed in with the salad, the chopped salad of creating this weird mix of junk that doesn't mean anything. Again, perhaps, very rarely, occasionally, blah, 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 blah. All of that weird salad of stuff that you create just because your mind creates stuff, because that's the job of your mind. Rarely, occasionally. Also, some being who is external to yourself will say something. But how in the world you would distinguish between, some genuine spiritual being? Like, think about the example with Maitreya and Asanga. Imagine that for 12 years, Venerable Asanga had been hallucinating on mushrooms, right? And his world was complete and absolute chaos. How in the heck would he know what was genuinely Maitreya Buddha appearing and what was just the hallucinogenic slop coming from his own mind? He couldn't know. And you guys know from doing a little bit of meditation with me, your mind becomes more clear, more sharp, more discerning, less busy with creating stuff that doesn't exist when you train in meditation. He had been training in meditation for 12 years when he saw Maitreya. So he was way more sane than any of us. Okay, Nat, I'll see you later. So my problem with hallucinogens is that because you are getting a chopped salad of reality simulation generation and you can't know what is genuine or not genuine, none of it is reliable. You're already hallucinating enough. Why do you need to hallucinate more? And yes, you may, on rare occasion, from time to time, have some experience of some of the other layers of consciousness. That might be an important experience that leads you to some real kind of training, but it's completely unreliable. You can't make it happen when you want it to. And even those types of experiences can be hallucinated, where you have a hallucinated experience of something formless or internal that actually doesn't give you real insight into what the mind is and what it's like. Because even here and now, you can sort of vaguely imagine a space that is as big as this room. Now make it a little bigger. It's the size of a house. Now make it a little bigger. It's the size of half of a neighborhood. Now visualize it a little bit bigger. It's the size of a city block. Now visualize it a little bigger. It's everything you can see, sort of like from one mountain to the next mountain. So your mind, with some training in particular, it can visualize spaces that are literally, according to the great yogis, you can visualize things that are literally limitless in scope. You can visualize limitless space. So you can hallucinate limitless space also. You can hallucinate an experience of the entire universe and you being a formless being observing the entire universe, where you didn't actually have that experience as a genuine experience of the nature of consciousness expanding out. You just created a mental picture of it being like that, and you couldn't tell the difference between that and real life. You see? So all of these experiences are then completely unreliable as sources of truth because of how they came to you, even if they're profoundly important in setting you along some path where you could actually find out one day what the truth is. I know hallucinogens break people out of old patterns, for example, and then they want to pursue truth, they want to pursue meditation. They really want to get to the bottom of it, because when you turn the mind inward, even with hallucinogens, it's way different than you expected. So that I think is positive. And I know that low dose hallucinogens can help with depression, and there may be some clinical applications where it's helpful. But as a spiritual path, I think for the people who are so inclined, beyond the very initial stages, if you happened to be set on the spiritual path by those experiences without really seeking it out in that way, fine. But it's not a path, and it can't take you to truth because it's unreliable as a way of getting to truth. Training in meditation is a reliable way of getting to truth, because you know that you're getting more and more of your bullshit and your delusions and your making shit up in your head, etc., out of the way. Since you're getting that stuff out of the way, what's appearing is increasingly the fact, increasingly the truth. With hallucinogens, you're creating a chopped salad of your delusional nonsense, and you're experiencing it as if it's real. And sometimes, on rare occasion, you break through and see something real just because of the force of the hallucinogen, but you have no way in reality, you have no way when you come back to really distinguish that from what wasn't real. So, long story short, yeah, there's one teacher in the FPMT used to say, people would ask, Lama Yeshe would say, people would go, oh, hallucinogens, hallucinogens, hallucinogens. And he would go, don't you hallucinate enough already? You're hallucinating all day long. you have ignorance. You have problems with your cognitive process that are screwing up your whole life. And now you want to take something that makes more hallucinations? Why don't you do some meditation that makes less hallucinations? How about that? Do something new. Okay. Mystical delusions. Yeah, exactly. Delusions of mystical stuff happening. Are feelings unreliable? Yeah, feelings in the sense of emotions are usually not very reliable. Most of what we have in terms of emotion comes from our past, either this life or a past life. And most of it comes from exaggerated types of perception. So earlier you looked at the carpet, for example, and you watched your vision fill in this whole visual field with weird random patterns. And you realized for the first time that most of your visual field is just made up based upon what your mind expects to be there. Besides this tiny little pinhole that you happen to be looking at any given time, the rest of it is just filled in like a computer that hasn't rendered the rest of the image, And then when you look over there, you realize that your mind was making all that up. You can do that exercise in like 2 minutes. And so on top of generating the experience of reality, your mind then exaggerates various qualities about that reality, where it makes some things seem way better than they are, in fact, and it makes some things seem way worse than they are, in fact. And then because of causing them to appear this way, we also have emotional reactions related to the way that they're exaggerated. So for a great example of this is think about somebody that you had a relationship with and it didn't end very well. In the beginning, the way they smelled, the way they tasted, the way when they touched you, your skin would just when you saw them, they were almost sparkling. The sound of their voice, you could just sit and listen to their voice. They could talk for hours. You could fall asleep on the phone, because your mind exaggerates the positive qualities. And then you spend more time with them, and this exaggeration starts to wear off. And it wears off. And then you go, wait a minute, where's that awesome person? Where did that magical person go that I thought? And then you start to get bored. And then you start to get annoyed. And then you start fighting. And then you break up. And then if someone's wearing that cologne or that perfume you really liked and you pass you on the street, you go, ugh, God. Or if someone puts on a song that person liked, you go, dude, turn that off. Next song, change the station. When you see someone on the street that looks like them, you go, oh. Or they just have the hairstyle or something. You go, oh, yeah, I don't like that person. Yeah, my ex had that hairstyle. If they touch you, right, like you see them and you have to shake their hand or something, you're kind of like, oh. Why? Because your mind exaggerates the negative qualities of this person that you don't like anymore. So our mind has this tendency emotionally to exaggerate, when if you train in opening the sense gates, for example, those exaggerations aren't there. When you pull back the conceptual content, those exaggerated qualities aren't there, actually. They don't exist. They aren't there. So all of the emotional reactions you're having over and over and over again in relation to those qualities are actually complete delusions. And this is why Buddhist psychology says those are afflictions, klesha, afflictions. It's a mental disorder. It's a mental disease that you are suffering from, an affliction. That's why we use that language. Your emotional states, by and large, are afflictions because they're based on exaggerations of shit that don't exist. What else would you call that? It's a mental disorder. It's a mental disease. And it causes you to do all sorts of weird stuff and hurt yourself and hurt other people. I mean, if that's not a disease, what is it? And the cure is to train in meditation, fix the cognitive problem, and then engage with reality the way it actually is. And in the meantime, cultivate compassion so that you do less stupid shit. Okay. Let's see. We've been at it quite a while now. Let's see. Meditation's a higher form of psychotics. Yeah, meditation is much, much, much more profound than taking drugs of any kind. Not to take anyone out of it, but guys, please like the stream. Yes, if you're here and this is meaningful to you, the algorithm likes it when people go. And then if you do that, more people will find it. And then other people will get to experience the love as well. I'm going to replace the terms fun and trip with an urge for meditation practice. And the fun will happen. Yeah. Yeah. I think if you just think about the benefits of meditation to actually get at how things are, it's a little bit less sexy than taking a drug and way less trendy. Psychedelics are having their moment in the sun at the moment. But it really does work. Meditation is fun to me already. It's just cool and interesting. Yeah. I mean, if you get good at meditation, it is actually fun, especially if you can do it with other people, you know? Meditation is really trying to be one with nature. John, there's a wonderful book you might like. What's the name? One Straw Revolution by... I'm forgetting his name. It's a Japanese author. One Straw Revolution, like a piece of straw. So One Straw Revolution is about a Japanese mystic who has a Confucian, Taoist, Buddhist, Shinto blend. You know, he's kind of a universalist. But he had an experience, kind of a meditative experience that came upon him suddenly. And then he did farming the rest of his life. And his work is just absolutely phenomenal. He wrote a bunch of books. Oh, yeah. And he makes an interesting argument that, like, think about what we do with Foundation 1, for example. Foundation 4, for example. We're trying to get in touch with the natural state. So we're actually, as meditators, we're trying to become more natural. We're trying to become more like what we are before it gets all screwed up by delusions and hallucinations and afflictions. So you are trying to get in touch with the natural state, the natural condition, how things naturally are. You're not trying to fabricate some weird thing. You're trying to remove the junk that's on top of how things actually are naturally. You see? So it's a very cogent observation. That is really what we are trying to do at the end of the day is to return to a natural condition. So I'm just going to quickly, unabashedly, shamelessly plug my course once again. So, of course, I do these live streams. If you go down below, you'll see the school course. It costs about $29, about the cost of a meal. And what I offer with that, of course, is the materials that are in the course. But more importantly, you can reach out to me personally, and I'll coach you on how to do all this stuff in real life. In addition to just coming on here and giving more general advice. So that course is also going to grow over the next year or so. I'm going to improve the videos. I'm going to add a lot more material, and my book on meditation, which is extremely in depth and tailored specifically to people who want to train in meditation in real life, will eventually be part of that course as well. There are already excerpts of it in there, but not the full book. So please do, if you find this valuable, if this is worth your time, sign up for the course. Click the school link below. Sign up for that course. If I can get about 40 people to sign up for the course, then I can do this full time. I can make a lot more content videos so that you guys can keep getting educated on this. And I can continue getting on here every day and training with you. If I don't get 40 people in the next few months here, then my wife is either going to murder me in my sleep, or I'm going to have to get a part-time job, and you'll be seeing at least half as much as me of me as you're seeing now, if not less than that. So it's pretty important. I also have a link to a GoFundMe if you'd like to just make a larger donation so that other people and yourselves can continue enjoying this. You can go to the GoFundMe and just drop whatever amount of money you'd like to drop. And I think for my household, roughly speaking, to kind of break even, I need to have, not that much. I think it's like $1,000 or something a month on my side for us to be able to just kind of break even and exist as a household. So whatever you can contribute to the GoFundMe, or if you want to drop into the school course and go that way, either one deeply appreciated by me and my wife, of course, and will enable me to continue doing this with you guys, which I'd really like to do. There's really nothing else I want to do with my life other than this. So if you find this beneficial, help me do that so that I can keep doing this with you. That's my earnest request. Okay, let's take a look at the chat. When you are deep in it, I like that, in it, you can feel a lot of awesome stuffs from nature, the breeze, inner feelings. Yeah, when you're out in nature, one of the interesting things I'll get, I always say I'm not going to get weird on these streams, and then I get a little weird, don't I? Do you guys like it when I get a little weird? It seems like, anecdotally, it seems like the number of people on the streams goes up anytime I start talking about weird stuff. And then when I stop, it goes right back down. People they don't want to hear about the serious stuff. They want to see me crying or talking about chi or prana. Okay. So, again, super, super weird stuff. Okay, Sam has authorized me to go nuts, and coming from Sam, that really means something. Internet number one. Okay, so let me see. Okay, so nature. I'm going to give you two interpretations for this, and one is sort of my anecdotal experience and a little bit of stuff from the classical texts and whatever. And the other one is a bit more scientific based. So let's start with the scientific based one, just so that the 10 people who are here have to wait for the cool one, which will be afterwards. Okay. So the scientific one is this. You, as a reality generating machine, let's say, you generate all of this stuff that is your experience. But part of you generating that experience is using language and the definitions or meanings of terms and concepts, of terms and and sentences and paragraphs and so forth, and also image, right? So symbolic image in terms of color, or symbolic image in terms of, you know, like my cup, for example, with the skull impermanence. So when you're in a environment, when you're in a place that is filled with various symbolic meanings that are constantly attempting to increase your hallucinations and exaggerations, like every single commercial or ad on the planet trying to make women feel like they have a million things wrong with them. You're too skinny, by the way. Also, you're too fat. You're too tall, but also you're too short. You're too nice, but also you're not assertive enough. You don't smell good enough. You don't, but you also don't want to smell too strongly of good things. You should be completely natural, but don't be too natural, because other people don't like it if you're a little too rough, right? So every ad on the planet is just trying to make you absolutely neurotic and trying to tap into the exaggeration system that's already firmly in place in your mind. My heart mentor, along his journey of training that was about 50 years long, at one time he worked on Wall Street, and he used to say that the guys right next to Wall Street, not the finance guys, but there's a whole huge area right next to Wall Street where it's all advertisement people. He said that's actually where the evil is, not over with the finance guys. Because everyone's trying to convince you that you'll be happy if you just buy this thing. Okay. So if you're in an environment, again, we're talking about why entering nature is so helpful. If you're in an environment where the symbols of everything were basically built because of the exaggerated perceptions of people, or they're built specifically or designed specifically to make you desire more stuff or to be angry about stuff. Let me just give you a quick rundown. This room that I'm sitting in, let me see if I can do this without breaking anything. This room that I'm sitting in was built by people in the 19th century to show off how wealthy they were compared to all the poor people in Edinburgh who couldn't possibly afford to live over here or design stuff like this or put molding on or have gold mirrors or whatever. And we don't own this place. It's a flat, but my wife's obsessed with history, so we've moved in here. You know, she wanted to be in a historic flat. It was sort of a unicorn situation. It was quite reasonable. And so we moved in. In any case, this entire place is designed based upon the exaggerated perception that if other people see me as wealthy, that's good for me. Right? And then I turn on my phone, and every app is trying to get more and more of my attention by stimulating all of my negative emotions, whether it's exaggerated sense of desire or exaggerated sense of outrage or whatever. So all of these exaggerated perceptions are being produced over and over and over and reinforced over and over and over again when we're in quote unquote civilized society. So when we're in civilized society, all of our hallucinations and afflictions and problems are so much worse. And then you go out and you look at a tree and it's just not trying to do anything. You go, especially if you can get away from landscaping, to a place where nature is just doing what nature does. It's not trying to do any of that. none of it is there because of that. And so you look at it and you go, oh, it's stunning. Because the natural condition, absent all of that bullshit, is actually stunning. And I think there's something about our mind, there's something about consciousness that when it sees that, it goes, wow. Because we're used to seeing all of that nonsense all the time, where everything is made based upon some type of exaggerated, delusional mental condition. And when you see something that isn't like that, you go, wow, incredible. And something in you says, that's how it's supposed to be. That's how it's supposed to be. I've got to get away from all these people that are driving me nuts and get more of this. Unfortunately, just sitting in nature won't fix the problem, because the problem is your exaggerated perceptions. And if you hang out in nature long enough, you'll start exaggerating stuff in nature. So there's one more element, the weird element. When we were on our honeymoon, we went to Lisbon, we went to Evora. And in Evora, there's a cathedral. And next to that cathedral is the Chapel of Bones, where there are all of these, the entire building is, on the inside is decorated with human bones. It's wall to wall. The only place that doesn't have bones, I think, is the floor. And anyways, I mean, that was an interesting experience. It was interesting, but next door in the cathedral, we went, my wife and I went, and we were just looking at they have these little mausoleum things where they have the bodies of saints, of Catholic saints, and sort of tucked away, not in the main sort of strip that tourists would go to. There was one particular little mausoleum, and it had a grate over it, so you couldn't walk in, but there was a step up, so you could stand here, sort of in the doorway. You could step up, and you were right on the grate, and you couldn't walk into the room. And yep, I'm still here, Nat. Okay, I'll see you later, John. Wait, who's leaving? Cleric. Okay, I'll see you later, Cleric. So when I stepped up onto that grate so that I was closer to the remains of this saint, it felt like I had stepped into a bowl of pea soup. I mean, the physical presence of this being was still there. And it was thick and rich with a sense of sort of joy and humility and genuine concern for other beings. I mean, it still raises the hair on my arms thinking about it now. It was incredible. Absolutely incredible. So in Buddhist thought, we all do have these subtle substances that move through our system, prana, chi, Shen, the winds of Tibetan thought, etc. And if you train really, really hardcore in something like loving kindness or compassion, you build up a certain richness of that particular type of substance that is associated with that type of consciousness. So, sorry, every consciousness has these substances associated with them. They're not energy, because energy is a physical thing. These are not actually physical. They're material, but they're not made of particles. It's called form in Buddhism. They have form. They are located in space, but they aren't made of particles. So these substances that are associated with different states of consciousness build up in a person that's doing a lot of practice with a particular type of mental state. In any case, if you meet a great Buddhist saint, I got to meet, for example, Lama Zopa Rinpoche on one occasion. You can read his biography, Lama Zopa Rinpoche. If you look up his obituary, you can read his life story absolutely astonishing. I got to meet him on one occasion, and again, it's like walking into this thick, rich atmosphere, being in the presence of this person, and it totally scrambles you. You know, I felt like lightning moving through my body being in the presence of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. In any case, people in general have these emotional patterns that have these subtle physical substances associated with them, and those can, I think, leave a certain sort of residue in the environment. Those residues will be most closely associated with the bodies of those people, of course, but they also can build up in environments. So when you do practice in the same area, for example, all the time, like if here I am in my meditation room, if you do practice in the same area all the time, it builds up a certain atmosphere of substance in that area related to those practices. And this is why they recommend in the great texts of the meditative traditions, wherever it is you're doing practice, ideally, if you can, don't do other things there. You can do things that are related, like studying your texts, doing prostrations, prayers, whatever. Anything that's sort of virtuous you can bring into that space, but you want it to be clean in terms of the subtle physical substance presence that you're putting into that space. Again, not to get too weird. But also, if you don't believe in all that, that's fine. Psychologically, we do the same thing. We make associations, and if your association with the room where you meditate is that you had a big fight with your partner there and they threw a cup against the wall and it broke or something, every time you walk into that room, you're going to be like, ugh. And it's that little sort of, ugh, is going to push you off your training. So we could say it that way. But also, when you go out to nature, to finally come back to John's thing, nature, especially unspoiled nature, doesn't have all of these residues of negative stuff. And so the sort of substance you're walking into, you could say, is clean. It's like totally clean. So here you are walking into a space that in terms of how it strikes your senses, doesn't have all of these delusional motivations that drive people to do everything in the normal world, but also energetically, or in terms of these subtle substances, is totally clean. So your system just goes, wow, incredible. Yeah. Okay, let's look at the chat. It was like his walked by the way. I said to somebody the other day, it was like his walked by in the way people reacted at Ajahn Brahm's retreat. Like God, that should be. I think I'm having a little bit of trouble following you, but I think what you're saying is that Ajahn Brahm is like this, where just being in his presence you change, and it seems to be that change is a little bit more than just sort of like seeing him and he looks serene or something. That it's almost like a physical change is happening because you're in his presence. And yeah, I mean, this is a very common experience. If you meet greatly accomplished meditators, simply being in their presence changes you and changes the environment, changes the way that people behave. I don't know what the range for that is. I don't know how far away before the effect goes away, but the Dalai Lama was at a hospital. He had to go to the hospital a while ago, and even the doctors who don't believe in anything, you know, they're like totally secular, said it was just everyone in the hospital felt the Dalai Lama being in the hospital. That's how, like, the whole hospital was different because he was there. And then when he was gone, that sense that was this like thick presence that was there all the time was gone. So this is a real thing. Okay. Well, everyone, I was expecting this to be about an hour, and then we went a little bit over to do some meditation, and then things happened. Things were said. Tears were shed. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. And now I believe we have reached the end. Are there any other questions, comments, concerns before we wrap up? Okay. If I don't see anything come through, that is the audio delay. It should be to you now. If I don't see anything else come through, this will be my last call to say, if you're getting benefit from this, please do help me help you. Please do help me carry on with this and do it full time by either hitting the GoFundMe down below. I only need about £1,000 a month to be able to do this basically full time. So if it's within your means, drop something into the GoFundMe. Get rid of the GoFundMe. They take like 17%. You can slide that down to nothing. That would be greatly appreciated. Or you can sign up to the school down below, and I'd recommend you do that anyway, because I'm going to be putting the book materials for the meditation stuff in that course, and I'm going to be improving it over time. So for those who have hung in there for 3.5 hours, I don't know how you do it. I don't even like me that much. It's been a great pleasure having you, Sam, Nat. I think John, if you're still here, Cleric, if you catch the end of this later, I know you left. A lot of other people floating through that didn't say anything, but if this is your first time, know that for future streams, I'm on here usually around 7:30 to 8:30 London time every day. For future streams, you can bring comments, questions, etc. about meditation, and we usually do some practice, and then I answer comments and questions. Okay. All right. Thank you all so much for being here. As I like to say, thank you for coming. Hope to see you again soon. Cheers. Oh, we have a question at the last moment. If liberation comes through relinquishing clinging, could... Oh, now it's gone. Okay. In that case, again, try not to die before the next time I see you. And I'll see you very soon. Gong Show, you can put your comment in the comment section. And everyone who's here, please do hit that like button, hit the subscribe button before you go. That'll make sure that you see this the next time it comes up. And of course, other people will get to find it. So thank you guys. I'll see you later.